How are you feeling, Mika?
Awkward, tired, confused.
Confused.
I think I need to discover
Yeah.
who I am. I think I
Cool.
need to do some self-development.
All right, well, let's make a podcast.
Yeah, that
All
sounds like a
right.
good idea. I think that's how we all learn.
Welcome to Thriving Between the Lines, the podcast where we examine personal development books through the lens of intersectionality, making self-help content more accessible and relatable. I'm life coach and loudmouth Leslie Crudavilla Garcia,
And I'm Mika, an unbearable tattooed queer.
and together we're not just reading between the lines,
We're thriving between the lines. We're coming to you from Mianjin on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara nations.
You might know it better as Brisbane, Australia, but we at this podcast recognize that sovereignty has never been ceded and that it always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
So, what are we talking about today?
I reckon this is our preface. We're going to talk about what this podcast is about, who it's for, what prompted our creating of it.
Yeah, that sounds like a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, and set the tone for what to expect.
Yeah, let's go.
So who's this podcast for?
Well, I guess us.
You and me, Mika and Leslie.
Yeah, we represent all of everybody. No.
I am Mother Earth.
Yes. I think we are a pretty nice mix of like different marginalized community representation. Obviously not all, but some.
Yep.
And we're both in that kind of activism space where we are quite interested in intersectional feminism and how everybody fits into the world
Yes.
in different ways
Yes.
and with different starting lines.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, as a life coach, this topic is particularly interesting to me because so many of the discussions around personal development just completely dismiss the existence of marginalized people, people who have been subject to generational systemic oppression and things like that. I also run a personal development book club.
An amazing idea because a lot of these books are not safe to be read alone.
I like that description because I really enjoy reading personal development books. One of the many reasons that I started the book club was I wanted to make an activity that is inherently solitary into something more social, as book clubs traditionally do, but with the added benefit of exchanging insights that are intended to change people's lives and see what actually does work for our individual contexts. And it's interesting just how varied the content of the books can be, but the lens through which these books are being written is often very narrow.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I've read the first third of a lot of these books
Yeah.
and then found something where I'm just like, I'm done now.
It's one thing to read a book and not see yourself in it. I'm not expecting that I'm going to pick up a book and say, there isn't enough representation of polyamorous, queer, Black, Latina women. Oh, this is bullshit. I'm canceling it. Like, no, that would be a joke. Like, I would love to one day pick up a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leslie, but I have yet to find this book.
You have to write those.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, it's fine if a book doesn't represent you exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have to represent everyone. You just have to leave space for people to belong.
Yes. And I think that's the key, leaving space for the recognition that other people exist outside of people who have lived life the way an author has. And you touched on something that often gives me pause with a lot of personal development, with other kinds of media as well, when a creator will say something like, take what works, leave the rest. I don't disagree with that as a concept, but there are some contexts where I feel that that's a cop-out,
Yeah.
depending on how that content is then delivered.
Particularly those books that promise you the world as long as you follow their program.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that really bother me. If you just do what I did, you will be in the same place.
Oh my gosh. personal development books that are written from the perspective of like, if you follow in my footsteps, you will have these results. It excludes everyone.
Yeah.
I guess. Everyone is kind of speaking in absolutes, but that's another thing that really bothers me in a lot of personal development writing, when writers write in absolutes. This plus this always equals this. Men always do this. Women always do this. If you work hard, you will always succeed. If you don't have a positive attitude all the time, you will never succeed. It's the alwayses and the nevers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because humans are not that clean cut.
And the language that we use around these things matters as well. And I'm not sure if you knew this about me, but I have a master's degree in applied linguistics. So the whole sociolinguistic aspect of personal development books is something that I find myself zeroing in on a lot.
Yes, I have to say that probably is what gets to me the most, is when it's just particularly aggressive writing. Like,
Yeah.
you do this. Yeah. You have to be this way. Yeah. I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't want to be like you.
Yeah.
You're rich, but you seem like an asshole. So
Yeah, you
no
seem like
thanks.
you spent all of your time just grinding.
Yeah.
Rise and grind and nothing else.
I mean, not that type of grinding anyway.
The aim of this podcast, and what I want to accomplish with it together, is to help more people feel seen. To take a lot of these personal development topics and make them more accessible to people who are often completely dismissed in the main texts.
There's a lot of good gems, even in some very problematic books. Like, I can read a book where a lot of it I'm just thinking, no, I'm like turned off completely by this person's personality, but they do sometimes have good points to make.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to pull them out without getting completely turned off by the ignorant position they take.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for the lens that a person sees the world from, inspiring their potentially very problematic and damaging views, and those gems potentially come from completely other places at the same time. But when someone picks up a personal development book because they are looking for answers or looking for guidance or looking for some sort of inspiration, it can be really burdensome to have to sift through all of that individually. So by having these discussions between the two of us and with our guests, I'm hoping that we can make a lot of these concepts more accessible for people.
Because I guess you're always going to these books when you're in a vulnerable place. Like, you're turning to them because you're feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you're really not in your most resilient state to be able to go, oh, it's not personal.
Yeah.
So maybe we're making a safe way to access that knowledge.
Yeah. A safer way, for sure.
Safer, yeah.
Because it's like...
Nowhere's ever completely.
Yeah. It's worth noting that a lot of people who are in a vulnerable position where maybe they can't afford to see a life coach, an ethical life coach, or a psychologist or a counselor, or get the help that they need, books are free at the library. A lot of audiobooks are accessible for free. So it makes sense that this can often be the first point of contact for some people. And it's not always the most welcoming point of contact.
And I guess it's a very precious moment in someone's life when they go through something emotional and realize something needs to change. And just culturally, as there's a lot of like, psychology and psychiatry and that sort of stuff is just for crazy people. So, but there's this, it's socially acceptable and private to go find a book.
Yes, yes.
And a lot of people, they come to that point, they go to find that change. If they are faced immediately with resistance, you might lose that opportunity.
Yeah.
There might have been that moment for a person to become a better, more productive, more safe, fulfilled person in our society.
Yeah.
Like, even from that selfish point of view of, you know, how society just needs everyone to be productive, let's just be selfish about it. If we make things more accessible, our world's going to be better.
Yeah.
So from our perspective,
Yeah.
we would like people to live more fulfilled and happy lives.
Yes, absolutely.
I do always like to put things into politicians' perspectives.
Yes, always speaking like a politician, are you?
Just always translating. I call myself a translator. I can translate from many different perspectives and get them to hear each other.
Really a link there.
I love translating between trans and cis people as well because, I don't know, I just have a lot of different interests, so I can talk to lots of different people. And I just like talking.
Yeah.
Of course, a podcast is right for me.
Yeah.
Even,
Ask your doctor if podcasts are right for you. So what is your gender identification?
I identify as a man. I'm a trans man, and I use he, him pronouns. But I'm a little bit non-binary.
Okay.
Like binary, not like it's a scale, and I'm like right down the male end.
All right.
Yeah.
That's cool. I myself am a cisgender female woman, she, her, hers. I've never felt out of place within my body from a gender perspective, and I find that to be a tremendous privilege. I'm also a Black American, which comes with its own adventures.
Yeah.
Queer, polyamorous, also a Latina. My mother is Peruvian, and I spent a lot of my youth just in and out of Peru. I contain multitudes. Let's be multitudinous together, Mika.
I mean, a personality is pretty hard to round up in a few words.
Absolutely.
I'm still not sure what to say for myself, but I'm creative. I'm very adventurous, I guess. Like, even if it's not physically adventurous, mentally adventurous. And I enjoy a good discussion.
Yeah.
And a civil argument at times.
And it's so interesting, too, because there's so many books in the personal development / self-help category and systems and tests and things that claim to uncover your identity, your personality. So many personality tests, which really could be its own podcast series.
Yeah.
That are like, you are this. Your disc profile is this. Your human design archetype was this. And I find it interesting just how definitively a lot of these things try to present the findings. Whereas from my perspective, these things are just a starting point for a broader ongoing discussion. It can help give some perspective on the ways in which we interact with the world, interact with people, navigate through society. But it's like, it worries me when they get too attached to the results of a particular personality test or book and go, okay, this is me. Now I'm going to live this way. Boom, the end.
It's almost like people are onions.
You mean they'll make you cry?
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, I see the usefulness in tools like that. Like, we love boxing, where people, we need to categorize. But really, it's just a step further in understanding yourself. I know some people are just naturally going to want to attach to that, but to me, that is a stagnation.
Yeah.
I like to hold on to these things gently and let them serve me at the time.
Yeah.
But it's also another reason I'm trying to be better at not being too stubborn about my opinions at any one time, because I need to be open to change.
Yeah.
Because it's not a very a good way to approach the world to just kind of decide at one point in time with a certain amount of information that this is everything.
Yeah. And never mind the dubious scientific validity of a lot of systems, tests, concepts that claim to have the answers to how we're supposed to live our lives based on how we answer a series of questions. It's like, help.
Yeah. Well, studying a psychology subject last year, I was doing physics as well. Like, this is attached to this, which is attached to this. They all like perfectly mesh the mathematics just together. I mean, sure, not perfect. Then I was trying to do the same with psychology, and it took me like right until that last moment in the semester to be like, oh, these are different ways of understanding and approaching the same thing in different people, just depending what someone will understand better or suits the situation better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, they look like they are the same, like getting to the same point, because they are. It took me way too embarrassingly a long amount of time to put that together. I mean, I do believe in trusting those who have put in the time to study and think critically about things.
Yes, and have been under the level of scrutiny involved to have to really defend those findings.
Yeah, like it's the best method we have at this point in human evolution, human society. But like you can go down a dangerous route of being so questioning those opinions that you think that your uneducated opinion is more valid.
Oh gosh.
I would more recommend to get multiple opinions from those professionals rather than relying on your own research. I do like to do my own research to inform my questions to the professionals.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get so interested in those professions, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go to uni and actually study it so that I can be one of those people.
Yeah. And what is your current uni pathway at the moment?
I am doing a graduate diploma in science, sports and exercise, because I'm looking at medicine. I am hopeful for medicine.
Yeah.
I'm also very aware that only about 10% of people who are on that path get in. But it's something I've been interested in since I was a teenager and has taken a lot of self-development to gain the maturity and also the self-confidence to think that that's a viable pathway.
I'm very excited about following you on your journey through that as well.
Yeah, hopefully our listeners as well might be with me on that journey. Come with me through medical school and the horrible application process.
Oh, your next podcast can be called Mika Does Medicine.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you something. What is your go-to response to the question, how are you?
It would usually be, oh yeah, getting there. I like that one because it is technically truthful, but no one's going to ask any more questions.
I like that. But I think the polite answer is supposed to be, oh, I'm doing great. No, positive vibes only.
Yeah, how dare I emotion dump on you by giving you a truthful answer? My theory is, if you ask me such a personal question, expect a personal response.
Yes. I agree. I mean, there's so much of this hide how you're really feeling from people because you don't want to impose on them.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get that. You don't want to trauma dump on everyone you meet, but it's hard to swallow this whole idea that we're just all supposed to pretend to be fine all the time.
Yeah.
And if we're not fine, that somehow we're failing.
Yeah, or that it's rude of you to go out in public and dare be less than perfect.
Yep.
It feels like I'm lying to people if I have to always be like, oh, I'm amazing.
But you are amazing.
I mean, yeah, but I might not be feeling amazing.
Okay.
People also don't understand if people live with chronic illness and things like that. There's rarely going to be a time where you want to answer in that super positive mindset.
Absolutely. And one of the many reasons I'm excited about doing this podcast with you as well is that we know each other, but not that well.
No, we've only been friends for 6 months. We also just saw each other across the room and our eyes met and we're like, we're going to be friends.
Yes. Yeah. Getting back to the purpose of this podcast, I've been working full-time in the personal development industry since early 2019. Before that, I was doing a lot of other kinds of work in various countries. And I also have 3 citizenships. Did you know that?
I mean, I could have guessed.
You could have guessed that I had 3 citizenships. As a life coach, I spend a lot of time in the personal development space. I meet a lot of other life coaches and coaches of different kinds, some of whom are doing amazing work. They're really empowering people and they're community minded and they're helping make the world a better place. But I also meet a lot of coaches who are actively doing harm to individuals, to communities, especially to marginalized communities. That's definitely not just a me thing. This is the general perception, I believe, of life coaches. There are a lot of misconceptions about what coaching is. And then when you think about the ethics of coaching, that's a whole other discussion. Like, so much of the work that I do with clients is around mindset, is around productivity as needed.
No, productivity is the only way to be a valuable human in our society.
Yeah.
If you're not productive, you have no value.
That's the thing. It's like productivity and people's relationship with that really matters. I really enjoy being productive in the sense of having an aim to get a number of tasks completed and then doing those things, not necessarily to produce something of economic value. That's not to say that like nothing I do has economic value. I'm not like I'm participating in the system. I enjoy the hustle of running a business. I do not enjoy hustle culture.
Yeah. No.
The difference between hustling and hustle culture is this imperative and this hustle at the expense of absolutely everything else in your life aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like the hustle is all that matters. And that people who don't engage in the hustle, the go, go, go of it, are somehow losers.
Yes. Get everything you can out of life. Like, we only get a short time on the planet. I'm not going to sit around and waste it. That's what I see as hustling, not trying to rot the system or make all the money, or it's finding meaning and leading a life that feels worth living.
Yeah.
I've spent enough time sitting waiting for life to begin. I'm done with that now.
Yeah. Doing that in a way that's sustainable and healthy is so important. And in order for it to be sustainable and healthy, it's important that we know where to turn for guidance in the various things that we want to change within our lives.
Doesn't help that we live in a society that basically tells you to go, go, go until you burn out. Like,
yeah.
People and labor is a disposable thing. Just use people up until they're used up.
It's an issue in Australia, for sure. But one of the things that makes me so glad to live in Australia, so-called Australia, is that I'm not in the US.
I am so glad I'm not in the US.
My goodness. I remember before I left for good, sort of, in 2007, I think, is when I finally stopped going in and out and just stayed out most of the time. Even just getting time off was such a drama. Like, when I wanted to go traveling, I had to quit my job every time.
Yeah. It disturbs me. I look at a lot of, like, American work culture and the kind of movements of people trying to change it. And just the fact that even taking a weekend or a holiday or working reasonable hours is considered kind of lazy or not okay.
Another thing that's missing out of so many personal development books is the recognition of the role of privilege. Some of these writers, especially when they're reflecting mainly on their own experience, will write as if anyone can do what they did and they just need to try hard enough and then they'll succeed. They'll make lots of money. They'll get that corner office. They'll find themselves a high-value partner. And it's like, hey, good for you that you got the life that you say you want, but don't act like everyone starts on equal footing.
Mm-hmm.
And very few writers even acknowledge that. Mainstream personal development writers.
I have to say that was one of a big turning point in my thought processes is in my mid-20s. I did a development course and I thought, being raised female and at the time still presenting female, I thought it's not really as bad as they say, like. And then we did that exercise where you take a step for each privilege you have and where you're finding your start line for the running race.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll be a few steps behind, but that's all right. I was so far behind the cis-het white guys that I hung around. It was eye-opening, just all these little things that made their life easier for where they started from. that I realized that I really have been fighting against a tide, and that I deserve some kudos for how hard I've been swimming, to keep up. So, and that made me start to understand, because I didn't even know of the theory of intersectional feminism at the time.
Privilege is another one of those funny words in the personal development space. And people who speak in a way that recognizes privilege, especially when they don't have the same levels of privilege in a context, will often be assaulted by words like victim mindset. My goodness, that whole expression, the idea of having a victim mindset. And yes, there are contexts in which people do find themselves very comfortably sitting in a space of victimhood where nothing is their fault, nothing is their responsibility, everyone's out to get them, so on and so forth, and they stay stuck. However, when the idea of victim mindset gets weaponized, it's often against marginalized communities who are fighting back against something.
You have to be so careful at people who are in that place where they feel powerless and unable to change their situation. Being aggressive or accusational towards them for that is never going to help. You have to be very compassionate and very careful how you approach a situation like that. You want to help maybe someone to see the brighter side of things, but you can't just go up to someone and be like, smile, honey.
Oh my
gosh. If you just think positive, everything will be better.
Oh, and there's way too much of that. The whole toxic positivity culture of personal development, the people who it harms most are people in marginalized communities. And this is one reason it drives me particularly bonkers. I don't know, is bonkers ableist language? I'm not sure.
I don't even know the root of that term.
Neither do I. That's something that I'm going to have to look up.
Yeah, I get really worried, particularly with like Australianisms, where they're like, I have no idea where they come from. And I think to myself, oh man, is that problematic?
Yeah. And that's something that I hope to learn more about as we do this podcast as well. There are perspectives of my own that might change over our discussions with our various guests and various topics. I might say things during this discussion that I will look back on and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that.
Hey, I'm happy if people see us grow. I think that is important for people to understand. It's always okay to change your perspective and your mind. And this weird thing we've got in this culture of like, no, when you're 18 years old, you choose a perspective and you must stick to your guns for the rest of your life.
Yes.
That's called being stuck. That's like no emotional development your entire life. Yeah. I absolutely have said many a thing that I would be ashamed to say now, but I also need to own that that was where I was at then. And you can just feel glad that you have learned and changed.
Yeah.
Not live in that shame.
Yeah. When you know better, you do better. Hopefully.
Exactly.
Some people, they learn of something and they stay the same anyway.
Because
especially people who are so absorbed in the type of personal development culture that's all about separating the winners from the losers. They stay in that kind of alpha winner, go, go, go mindset. And it's like, well, if someone else isn't killing it the way I am, it's because they're the problem. It's only them. It's this culture of extreme personal responsibility that makes it so much harder for people to actually empathize with people whose lived experience does not match their own. But another reason I think the topic of this podcast is so important is to highlight those issues, because the influence of personal development media and personal development books is underestimated in its impact on politics, on education, and the way we view each other, the way we view ourselves. And that's going to affect how we move through society.
The stuff that sells is the things that are like, simple, do these 3 steps and you will be successful. And it has to be strong, definitive, like no room for change or movement or development. And once they've said things in such strong terms, to change your mind or go back, they've left no space for that.
Yeah.
They've kind of said, no, this is the way it is and the way it is forever.
Mm-hmm. When there's any sign of wavering or uncertainty in the kind of science that has an impact on society, it makes it really easy for people to go, see, they don't know what they're talking about, but I've got this miracle cure because I know what I'm talking about. And it's like a multi-level marketing funnel.
It's almost like,
come on now.
It's almost like snake oil salesmen have never had any repercussions or regulatory bodies to actually hold them to account, so they can say whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
And professionals actually have an ethical boundaries and evidence basis to decisions that they make. And so you do have to be more careful as a professional.
Yeah.
And most people's psychology prefers and errs towards those certain like leader type personalities of just here is simple answers and it's not confusing.
Yes.
And you can just follow it and you'll be all right.
Yes. The oversimplification that a lot of people are just ravenous for is also part of the problem.
Yes.
Especially with some writers. I don't want to get into the specifics of the writers we're going to cover just yet. But with some writers, their whole jam is taking something complex, oversimplifying it to fulfill an agenda in some cases. And people want things to be simple. I get that. Life is complicated. We have to make so many decisions. And when we can simplify some things, it's less work that we have to do, which is great in some contexts. I feel like I'm just going to say the word context over and over and over again over the course of this podcast. It becomes a problem when that oversimplification is applied to situations that people are in that are impacted by generational trauma, by systemic oppression, systemic poverty, gender-related violence, a housing crisis, and a lot of the things that widen the divides within society in that socioeconomic aspect. I'm always attacking the personal development cliches. You know, we've talked about the whole concept of having the same 24 hours in the day, which, I mean, next time I hear someone say that, I'm seriously just I'm going to explode and confetti is going to come out of my body.
Yeah.
Because it's
I
like,
really do not have the same 24 hours. Like, I have maybe 5 hours that I can function properly in a day.
Yeah.
And then people kind of will look to, well, you can't even do your dishes, so why are you trying to go to uni or attempt anything greater than doing your washing and dishes and keeping the house clean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because I don't want to be just a housekeeper for myself.
And that's the thing too. Like, we are both sufferers of chronic illnesses, right? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your flavor of?
Yeah, if I can round it up. I guess the first thing that hit was when I was around 21. I was in my 21. I was diagnosed with a type of epilepsy that had gone unnoticed for most of my life, which turns out was affecting certain parts of my brain, that was affecting educational things for me. It caused language dysfunction. I was thought to have dyslexia, but epilepsy medication has helped that a lot. But then I also have mental health issues due to many reasons, partly living in what felt like the wrong body my whole childhood. And that can lead to overdoing things a lot, particularly with undiagnosed ADHD as well. I did a lot of overdoing it. And at some point, I developed fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
So I did have Ross River fever, and then basically never got rid of the symptoms of fatigue and aches and pains.
Oh my gosh, the fatigue. Now, we're both neurodivergent people. Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the conditions that I have to survive every month is PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. To oversimplify it, it's like PMS times a million. So it's like ovulation hits, and it's like I become a different person. I've made videos about this on my YouTube channel as well, but there's a growing body of evidence linking PMDD to neurodivergence, to ADHD in particular. One of the ways in which it affects me a lot is the fatigue. My goodness. The brain fog. I mean, like right now I'm in my luteal phase, so I'm in the grips of that PMDD spell, but I feel quite functional, partly because I've managed this cycle to avoid any like major stress triggers that usually flip that switch.
Yeah.
That said, I do have the brain fog issues I'm navigating. It's more challenging to articulate some of my thoughts, and that's the thing that drives me the most bonkers.
I was about to say...
Because my intellect is something that I value tremendously.
Same. And I really, my whole life, have felt really insecure and upset, I guess, that before I was treated for the epilepsy either, like I could barely express myself. It's become a lot better since then. But the brain fog, it feels like it's stealing who I am.
Yes, that is exactly how I was trying to explain it to someone before. It's like when I feel like my intellectual capacity is diminished in any way, I feel like something has been taken away from me. I feel like I've been disarmed by something.
Yep.
And it adds to those feelings of, like, it adds to the depression and anxiety. It adds to those feelings of vulnerability.
Yeah, I definitely relate. Because with mine, fibromyalgia, kind of the only difference between chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia is fibromyalgia, there's more focus on the pain, and chronic fatigue, there's more focus on the fatigue, even though they both have pain and fatigue as the main symptoms. I put up with the pain for ages, but the fatigue just, I feel like I can't do anything. Like, I would, even just trying to work to earn a living, you know, the pain, number one, makes physical jobs not the best. And then I prefer jobs that make me think. Otherwise, I get bored so quickly. But when you have whole weeks where you can barely function, you can't afford to make a mistake on, you know, an important project or anything like that. It could cost millions. So, yeah, it just, there's a frustration there that I am still trying to find ways around. Like, this is my brain, this is how it's going to be. But I refuse to just accept that, like, I have to go and sit in a corner for the rest of my life.
And I think that's another reason the topic of this podcast is so important. Because neither one of us is advocating for people just going, oh, well, okay, this is my situation. I'm going to sit back and just, you know, be a quote unquote victim.
Oh, no.
and just go, oh, no, see, this is my excuse. This is my way out of actually having to do anything with my life. It's like, well, no, because that's just going to make you feel worse. And it's going to have an impact on the people around you and the communities that we identify with as well. Like, we want our communities to be healthier.
We do. And
we want to be part of the mainstream conversation around personal development.
Yeah, and we want our communities to shine with all this talent I see sitting there in the sidelines that needs to be out in the court.
Yeah. And sometimes people who have like chronic conditions who don't know that they do because they're undiagnosed or because the people around them don't have the understanding to recognize and address those situations. They can't atomic habits their way out of these situations and then like live, laugh, love into you know, this transcendent state of quantum consciousness and just manifest their way to ultimate enlightenment.
But they're just making excuses.
Well, yeah. So it's really important to be able to take some of these very influential pieces of media and help do our part to make them more accessible.
I don't want to use my illness as an excuse but it is a reason and something I need to be gentle with myself about.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to be able to do things the way other people do them.
Yeah.
But I refuse to believe there's not a way for me to do it.
Yes.
And I will kick down doors until I find one.
Exactly. It's the whole kicking down doors mentality that I find myself taking into a lot of the spaces that I've had to navigate.
And sometimes I don't have the energy to kick down doors, but I do tap on them and knock and see if anyone will answer.
Yep. Yep.
Because there's other ways to do these things.
Yeah.
There's the gentle way, there's the aggressive way, there's the I'm full of energy and aggravation and just need something to change. And then there's the I would like something to change, but I can't do it
Yeah.
the full-on way right now.
Yeah. As a human rights activist, I refuse to accept that there isn't a way for the rest of us, so to speak, to thrive in spaces that we're not welcome in, let alone invited into. That's one of the things that often perplexes some people when they meet me and I talk about how freaking frustrating the life coaching industry is and the personal development industry is. They're like, so why are you part of this industry? It's like, this is an occupation.
Yeah.
I'm occupying personal development. It's an act of resistance. I'm also really good at it,
Yes.
you know?
There are certain personalities, certain people that have the strength and the stubbornness and the resilience. The first people to go into those spaces are not going to cruise in.
Yep.
Like, you go in there and people resist. They try and push you out. They try and make it uncomfortable, or they
yes.
just don't make space for you. But there are certain personalities like you and I where we are pretty good at going into places that we're probably not most welcome, and yet just don't let it phase us. Like,
Well,
not too much.
yeah.
Not
Don't let
maybe
it
not-
defeat us.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I do get phased at times, but
Yeah.
depends on how mentally strong I am at the time.
Depends on where I am in my cycle sometimes.
Yeah.
Whether I have the patience to deal with a particular flavor of bullshit that day.
I have months where I'm just like, yeah, no, not at the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to make way for people. I'm like, come on with me. I'll go in and I'll make space, and then you come on in.
Yeah. Holding the door open for people. And this is where privilege comes into play as well. Like, I recognize my privilege in a lot of contexts. It's not just a thing that you either have or you don't. It depends on the context that you're in. To say that you have privilege in some area doesn't mean that you haven't struggled in your life or that you haven't had to work for things. Some people have had to work a lot harder in some ways than other people. And it's all about those differing levels of privilege in various contexts. But I grew up in a home where both of my parents they're still married. We've never struggled financially. I'm also educated. I guess I've lived, worked, and studied on 5 different continents
Wow.
and traveled extensively through various parts of the world because I've had the means to do that. Sure, a lot of that has been off of my own efforts, but always having a safety net in that I had a stable home to return to meant that I could afford to take risks that some other people could not.
That's absolutely something I've realized in
Yeah.
my life as well. Having that safety net of family who are there for you
Yeah.
makes it so much easier to jump out into the world.
Yeah. And that's also the key, though, isn't it? It's not about oh, well, the only reason I have all the things that I have or have been able to do the things that I've done is because my family has supported me. It's more complex than that. For me, I've taken a lot of risks. I've done a lot of really hard work to get to where I am right now. And my risks happened to pay off more than they have not.
Yeah. There's always backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Like, things take you either way.
But the recognition of that privilege is really important to me because it's not like I, find my little comfy place in society and go, oh, okay, here I am. Yay. And then just live my life. It's about opening that door for whoever needs it to say, like, this is about having stronger, healthier communities. We can open doors in certain areas and make room for people, make more space for people. I just find it as a matter of duty, really.
Yeah. I have to say, I have short moments of that temptation to settle down and just be comfortable. And then I find out I'm not comfortable. Like, I withdraw from community stuff or withdraw from my volunteer sort of things, and I realize I'm not comfortable while there is injustice and inequality. I don't think I can ever see myself really sitting back and just accepting that.
Yeah.
Ever since I was a little kid. My mom's just like, chill out. And I'm like, no, injustice.
Yeah. Well, another fun fact, my dad was part of the original chapter of the Black Panther Party.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like, we've got pictures of Bobby Seale in our family photo album, you know? And my mom, she's also an activist in her own right. And I was raised in a household where when you saw injustice, staying silent and doing nothing just was not an option.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have brought, well, into every aspect of my life, really.
Yeah.
But especially the way that I navigate the personal development world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's a bit like me as well. My mom tells me to chill out, but Mom, I'm following your footsteps. Like, I'm going to emulate you even from a very young age.
Yeah.
And my parents brought me up very, like, they weren't into gender roles, and they believe that all people are of equal value, even if they're not given equal opportunities.
Yeah.
And that, like, they had no tolerance for, like, class systems and thinking you're better than anyone else. And
Yes.
that sort of thing. So, like, that's one of the things I'm so grateful to them for. And my life might have been easier if they'd taught me to just, like, comply and accept my position and accept that the world's always going to have injustice. But I don't think I would like the person I am. And I'm glad I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
I sometimes wander into that part of society and I'm like, damn, this is boring. And I leave.
Oh my gosh, I know, right?
What do people do if they're not busy trying to, like, philosophize and talk about ethics and talk about ways to improve the world?
Yeah. Having the choice to not talk about these things is its own level of privilege.
Absolutely.
It's like, that's a massive privilege.
I would love to not have to, but also I'm glad I'm not that type of person.
Yeah. Can I share with you some of the names that I rejected for this podcast?
Yes, please.
While we're in the business of clarifying what the purpose and setting the tone for this podcast is. So some of these came from my partner and other people. The Tome Police.
The Tome Police?
The Tome Police. You know,
Okay.
tome, like a written work.
Yeah.
One reason that I didn't like that, even though it sounds kind of funny, it's not about just taking down personal development writing.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
going to be talking about books that we really enjoy as well.
I hope so.
I hope so. And we might have differing opinions on some of the books also. Okay. Book cocky.
Might limit your outreach.
Yeah. I kind of thought, okay, that's interesting. But then I was like, but you know, we're all about consent and blah blah. Then I was like, well, hang on a minute. You can do like consensual bukkake.
Oh.
But then I was
would
also
assume.
like, none of that. I was distracting myself. Page Against the Machine.
I kind of like that one.
Yeah. It gives more of a hint as to where our values might lie. But again,
We're not
it's
in a
too much
space-
of a takedown.
Yeah, and I'm not in a space of rage generally. Like I am defiant, but in a quite palatable way. I don't have energy to be angry all the time. Like, I'm past that. I'm too tired. I can be disappointed.
Oh, was this one?
Okay, a little bit of anger.
Think and Grow Bitch. Can you even like say it. It's like, what?
Uh,
Like, we will talk about Think and Grow Rich. That is one of the books on the list. One of the things that really bugs me about personal development writing that has maintained its popularity over these decades is some of these books are from the 1930s.
what?
Yeah. Think and Grow Rich was from the 30s.
Holy crap, I didn't realize self-help books have been going that long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people dip way back into like times that just do not resemble anything like what we're going through right now. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's such a great book. It's like, but why? Books from the 30s, books from the 50s.
Yeah, let's think about what we were doing to certain groups of people in those
Yeah,
times.
it's like, what else was happening in the world at the time? That's not to say that there isn't any value in looking at those books. Not at all. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that it makes it that much more important to apply critical thinking, which I used to teach professionally in the university system, to the things that we're reading. Think about the context of the things that we're reading and think about the impact of those books on broader society. And then there were a bunch of different variations on like the concept of margins, in the margins, from the margins, margins, which would make sense for the content that we're covering, but it's also overused in this context. Unfortunately, because I quite liked it as a concept, but it's really about bringing things to the surface and thriving in spite of not always being included in the conversations about success, about wellness, about thriving.
Yeah. I feel very similarly in that you can focus on your disadvantage and where you are or where you came from. But if you revel in that, if that's your whole world, you're not looking forward. You're not looking for those gaps to get through, to like find your way through the maze. And I can't change certain things. What's the point in spending too much time there in my own grief and sadness when that's going to do nothing for my life, anyone else's life, and the world isn't going to suddenly become soft and squishy and look after you and make adjustments.
Yep.
One day, maybe humanity will become enlightened. But until that time, I need to do what I can to work towards a better future for me and my community.
Yep.
And I don't want to pull the community backwards either. Like, I don't think there is a lot of use in that sort of mindset.
Yeah.
I understand that mindset. I've been there. But I highly recommend going through that grieving process and coming through to the healing process.
Yes.
Get it done. Get it dusted.
Yep.
Let's go.
Yeah. And I think with that statement, you've really helped summarize the purpose of this podcast. And hopefully we've set the tone for what's to come.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited to see what happens in season 1.
Me too.
I'm excited about the guests that we've got on board already and to see who else is going to crop up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And I really want people to understand, people who don't identify with the mainstream whatevers, that we do see you. You have a right to succeed and to thrive just as much as anyone else.
If you put all of us together, those of us who feel like we don't belong or there's no space, we
Yep.
actually do get quite a decent group of us. So that's why I am so passionate about all of us working together.
Yes.
Like,
The collaboration.
It kills me when there's transphobia or racism and things like that within our own communities.
Yeah.
We do not have the luxury of having that sort of hate in our communities. We need to work together to take back at least some part of society for us.
Yes.
We don't deserve to all be pushed down when we're just as smart, passionate, beautiful, loving, worthy people that should be filling society.
Yeah.
People with lived experience who that experience is actually incredibly valuable.
There's so much that we've only just scratched the surface on.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll get to know so much more about each other. Our listeners will get to know so much more about us and our context, our background, why we're doing this. And through these conversations with our amazing guests about each of these books, I think it's really going to unlock some pretty interesting things.
I think so. I think we're going to have so many people ready to come out here and join the movement. The
kicking down of the doors.
The door kicking.
Kicking down the library doors.
Yeah.
Let us in.
The letting go of the grief and finding the joy.
Traveling with the grief in a way that's not going to completely take you down. So yeah, you think we got a podcast in us? We doing this?
I do. I think we got so much good stuff coming up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mika, for joining me for the preface for our podcast.
Of course.
Love you.
You too, Leslie.
What's our sign off going to be?
Good day.
Be seeing you, won't I?
Water and fertilize.
Go put some shit in your garden.
Go piss on the lemon tree.
What?
You pee on lemon trees. They need urea to grow.
I'm learning so much already.
I found this out
the hard way.
Well,
You're like, where did this lemon tree come from?
My lemon tree wasn't thriving, and I was like, "Damn it! Why the whole year no growth?"
Oh, awesome!
Bit
So
of urea fertilizer, no problem.
So it's like we're pissing on personal development.
We're gonna make lemonade. We're gonna piss on personal development and make lemonade out of the fruit.
Yes, because we can do hard things.
We can do hard. Well, I normally piss when not hard, but
Oh my gosh! All right.
Let's make lemonade out of piss lemons.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. For now, you can follow us on Instagram at Leslie V Coaching. That's Leslie with an IE. And we'll see you next time for episode 1. Bye-bye.